The studio lights burned hotter than usual, but it wasn't the cameras that made the room feel like it was on fire. It was a tension between two women who could not have been more different. Kellyanne Conway, the seasoned political warrior who had survived some of Washington's fiercest battles, sat across from Jasmine Crockett, a freshman congresswoman with calm eyes and folded hands. In the next 30 seconds, something would happen that no one in that studio had predicted. Not the producers, not the host, not even Conway herself. What started as a routine debate about voting rights legislation would erupt into a showdown that exposed the limits of rage and revealed the unexpected power of composure. One woman came armed with decades of political brawling experience, a sharp tongue and an iron will to dominate. The other carried something far quieter, truth, calm, and the discipline not to take the bait. And by the time the cameras stopped rolling, only one of them would walk away with America's respect. It was a clash between old-school combat and new generation composure. And the moment Conway leaned forward, her voice cracking with fury, America leaned in too, because what happened next would break the internet. To understand just how explosive this showdown was, you first need to know who Kellyanne Conway is. For more than 2 decades, she has been one of the most recognizable and polarizing faces in American politics. At 57, Conway isn't just another commentator. She made history in 2016 when she became the first woman to manage a winning presidential campaign, steering Donald Trump's unlikely victory into the White House. From there, she served as his counselor, earning a reputation as one of the administration's fiercest defenders. Her style has always been unmistakable. Sharp, relentless, and unapologetically combative, Conway built her career on refusing to back down. Even when cornered by the toughest journalists in Washington, she could take a hostile question, twist it, flip it, and leave her opponent scrambling to respond. Her gift for coining phrases, like the infamous alternative facts, made her both admired and ridiculed, but never ignored. By the time she entered the studio debate, Conway's playbook was clear. She didn't win by being polite. She won by overwhelming her opponents, raising her voice until hers was the only one heard, and drowning every challenge in a tidal wave of talking points. That morning, she had come dressed for battle, a crisp white blazer layered over a black top, her blonde hair styled with the precision of someone used to television lights, and eyes sharpened with the confidence of a woman who had outlasted every political storm thrown her way. In her hands, she carried folders of notes, each page filled with statistics, accusations, and pre-scripted lines she was sure would cut through the noise. Kellyanne Conway walked onto that set with a veteran certainty. She had seen it all. She had sparred with the biggest names in media. She had survived scandals that would have sunk others. And facing a freshman congresswoman from Texas? In Conway's mind, this would be another easy victory. But what she didn't realize was that the very tactics that had carried her for decades were about to backfire, because sitting across from her was someone she couldn't rattle. Someone who had mastered a completely different kind of power. If Kellyanne Conway represented the old guard of American politics, Jasmine Crockett embodied something entirely new. At 42, Crockett was far from a household name, until this moment. A congresswoman from Texas, she carried with her the weight of lived experience that shaped every word she spoke. Before she ever stepped foot in Washington, Crockett had been a public defender, standing up for clients who couldn't afford to stand up for themselves. Later, as a civil rights attorney, she became known for fighting cases that others were too afraid to touch. Her political career didn't come from climbing party ranks or chasing headlines. She won her seat by connecting with voters who felt invisible, working families, the elderly, young people whose concerns were brushed aside. Where Conway's reputation was built on sound bites, Crockett's was built on listening, and that difference showed in everything about her. On the day of the debate, Crockett arrived in a navy blue blazer, professional, polished, but not flashy. Her hair was styled simply, her jewelry minimal. She didn't bring stacks of talking points or rely on rehearsed singers. Her preparation came from something much harder to shake: confidence in her own truth, and a clear understanding of why she was there. While Conway armed herself with strategy and spectacle, Crockett came armed with patience and precision. She didn't need to shout to be heard. She didn't need to dominate to make her point. Her power lay in her ability to stay steady when others lost control. and to use her calm as a weapon sharper than any insult. Crockett's rise to Congress symbolized a generational shift, a new kind of leadership that didn't rely on volume, but on conviction. To her supporters, she represented authenticity in a political landscape drowning in performance. To her critics, she was an untested freshman who didn't yet understand the brutal realities of Washington. But as the cameras began to roll, one thing was clear. Jasmine Crockett was about to prove that composure could be more devastating than rage. And Conway, a veteran of countless political battles, was about to find out the hard way. The cameras blinked on, the microphones came alive, and suddenly the weight of one of America's most explosive political debates filled the studio air. The topic wasn't a minor bill or a ceremonial resolution. It was voting rights, an issue that split Congress, energized activists across the country, and become a flashpoint in the battle for the nation's political future. The host opened politely, trying to ease both women into the discussion. But Kellyanne Conway wasn't interested in pleasantries. Before the first question was even finished, she leaned forward and launched into a full-scale assault. "This so-called voting rights bill," she declared, her voice sharp and already rising, "is nothing but federal takeover of elections designed to help Democrats steal votes. And I am tired of freshman politicians like Miss Crockett pretending they understand election law." Her blonde hair swung with each animated gesture. Her voice grew louder, cracking with force as she jabbed her finger toward her opponent. Conway wasn't debating policy. She was making it personal. And then came the moment no one expected. Instead of matching Conway's fury, Jasmine Crockett simply folded her hands on the desk, waited for Conway to finish, and replied in a voice so calm it made the silence ring louder than the shouting that came before it. "Thank you, Kellyanne. I appreciate you sharing your perspective." That one measured sentence shifted the entire energy of the room. Crew members behind the cameras exchanged glances. The host blinked, caught off guard by the contrast. And Conway, who thrived on opponents firing back, looked visibly unsettled. It was a strategy Conway had perfected for decades. Attack hard, provoke anger, dominate the exchange. But Crockett wasn't taking the bait. Her refusal to raise her voice was more powerful than Conway's screaming. The debate had only just begun, but already the old playbook was starting to fall apart. And what happened next would push Kellyanne Conway to the breaking point. The host tried to steady the conversation, redirecting back to policy. But Conway wasn't about to let go of her opening attack. Her voice grew sharper, her hands cutting through the air as she rattled off accusations. Dead people voting, illegal immigrants voting, ballot harvesting in swing states, she snapped, her words tumbling out faster than the cameras could catch. This bill is nothing more than a blueprint for fraud, and freshman congresswomen like her don't even understand it. She pointed directly at Jasmine Crockett, her face flushed red, her tone rising by the second. The plan was clear. Overwhelm her opponent with noise, drown her in accusations, and force her into a defensive scramble. But Jasmine Crockett didn't scramble. She didn't even flinch. When Conway paused to take a breath, Crockett leaned forward slightly, her voice steady and controlled. "I'd love to hear specific examples of the voter fraud you're referencing," she said softly. "Which provisions of the bill concern you the most?" It was a simple question, but it landed like a body blow. Conway blinked. For the first time, she hesitated. The studio crew exchanged quick looks. The sound engineer winced as Conway's voice spiked into the microphone, his hands instinctively lowering the volume levels. In the control room, producers were glued to social media feeds. Viewers were already clipping the exchange, sharing Crockett's calm question next to Conway's red-faced fury. Conway tried to recover, doubling down. "The evidence is everywhere," she snapped, her pitch climbing higher. "You know it, I know it, the American people know it. But you and your party refuse to acknowledge it because it doesn't fit your narrative." Still, Crockett didn't raise her voice. She didn't bite. She simply nodded politely and asked again, "Which specific provision are you referring to? Because I have the legislation right here." It was a kind of calm professionalism that threw Conway completely off script. She wasn't used to her opponents staying cool under fire. She was used to shouting matches where she could bulldoze her way through. But Crockett's refusal to engage in the chaos was making Conway look more unhinged by the minute. And while Conway's voice cracked with rage, Crockett's composure was already going viral. Tweets flashed across screens. Crockett is handling this like a boss. Conway looks unhinged. This is painful to watch. But the meltdown was only getting started. Conway was about to cross a line that even her supporters couldn't defend. By now, the studio felt less like a debate stage and more like a pressure cooker. Conway's voice was hoarse from shouting, her blonde hair falling slightly out of place as she slammed her hand against the desk for emphasis. Every jab was sharper, every accusation more desperate, and yet none of it seemed to dent Jasmine Crockett's calm surface. And then it happened, the moment that would break the internet. "You need to stop being so reasonable." Conway screamed, her voice echoing off the studio walls. The words hung in the air like smoke after an explosion. For a heartbeat, the entire room froze. Host, crew, audience. Everyone processing the sheer absurdity of what had just been shouted on live television. Crockett didn't blink. She didn't smirk, didn't gloat, didn't even flinch. Instead, she leaned forward slightly, her tone softer than ever, almost compassionate. "Kellyanne," she began gently, "I can see that you're upset, and I understand why these issues matter so much to you. They matter to me too, but I think we can disagree about policy without questioning each other's character or motives." The silence that followed was heavier than Conway's loudest outburst. For the first time since the segment began, Conway seemed unsure. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. The fighter who had built her career on quick comebacks suddenly looked like she had nothing left to throw. And Crockett didn't stop there. With the calm confidence of someone who had been waiting for this exact moment, she pressed forward. "You spent a lot of time today telling me what you think I believe," she continued. "But you haven't asked me once why I actually support this legislation. So let me tell you, I support it because I've seen what happens when people can't vote. I've seen seniors turn away because they couldn't renew an ID. I've seen working parents unable to take time off on election day. And I've seen citizens silenced by a system that's supposed to represent them. I don't support this bill for Democrats to win. I support it for democracy to win." It was devastating in its simplicity. No raised voice, no shouting match. Just truth, spoken calmly, while her opponent sat red-faced and shaking. And America noticed. In real time, clips of the exchange began to explode online. Hashtags like hashtag stop being so reasonable and hashtag Crockett versus Conway were already trending. Memes were flooding social media. Conway's screaming face next to Crockett's quiet smile. Captions like, "How to lose an argument in one sentence," racking up thousands of shares. Conway had come to dominate. But instead, she had walked into a masterclass. And Jasmine Crockett had just turned political composure into a viral weapon. But the real explosion was still ahead. Because the internet wasn't just laughing at Conway's meltdown. It was rallying around Crockett's calm. The segment hadn't even ended before the internet erupted. In the control room, producers were whispering in disbelief as they watched hashtags explode across social media in real time. By the time the cameras went dark, millions of Americans had already seen clips of Conway's red-faced shouting matched against Crockett's steady calm. The first viral moment was Conway's outburst, "Stop being so reasonable." Within minutes, it had been clipped, captioned, and posted across Twitter, TikTok, and Instagram. The meme potential was limitless. Users overlaid the line on everything from customer service jokes to relationship arguments. One of the top posts showed Conway screaming, paired with a caption, "When your Wi-Fi won't connect, but your roommate stays calm." But the memes weren't just about Conway's meltdown. They were about Crockett's composure. A screenshot of her sitting serenely at the desk, while Conway shouted across at her, became the internet's new symbol of calm under chaos. Caption after caption read the same message. How to win an argument without raising your voice. On YouTube, short clips of the exchange skyrocketed. One titled, "Kellyanne Conway Melts Down, Jasmine Crockett Stays Calm," hit 500,000 views in less than an hour. Another clip with the title "Stop Being So Reasonable" was spreading even faster, pulling in millions of views overnight. Political commentators scrambled to keep up. Liberal voices praised Crockett as a rising star, while even conservative pundits struggled to defend Conway's performance. A well-known Republican strategist admitted online, "I've known Kellyanne for years. This wasn't her best moment." Crockett stayed calm, stuck to facts, and looked like the adult in the room. Cable news channels filled entire segments, replaying the clip on loop. Anchors couldn't resist highlighting the absurdity of Conway yelling at someone for being reasonable. Late-night comedy shows turned the meltdown into punchlines, with one host quipping. Conway basically yelled, "Stop making sense." That's not a debate strategy. That's a cry for help. And then came the global wave. European newspapers ran headlines like, "American debate, when shouting meets silence." Canadian analysts called it a textbook lesson in emotional regulation. In Asia, subtitled versions of the clip circulated widely, with viewers praising Crockett's calm diplomacy. Within 24 hours, the Crockett method was trending, not just as a meme, but as a genuine communication strategy. Commentators, professors, and business leaders were already dissecting her performance as a masterclass in composure. What started as a heated debate about voting rights had turned into something much bigger, a cultural moment that revealed a hunger for a new kind of leadership. And while Conway tried to spin the exchange as passion mistaken for intensity, it was clear the narrative was out of her hands. America and the world was talking about Jasmine Crockett. The internet had its fun with memes and viral clips, but the impact of Jasmine Crockett's performance didn't stop at trending hashtags. Within days, it became clear that what happened in that studio wasn't just a moment. It was a turning point. Political scientists began calling it the Crockett method. Professors dissected her calm responses in classrooms, noting how she acknowledged Conway's emotion, redirected back to facts, and asked clarifying questions that exposed her opponent's weak arguments. Communication schools clipped the exchange into training videos, showing students how staying composed under fire could dismantle even the most aggressive attacks. Universities weren't the only ones paying attention. Human resources departments across corporate America quietly added the clip to conflict resolution training. Executive coaches used it in seminars for Fortune 500 leaders, pointing out how Crockett demonstrated that control and composure could command more respect than shouting ever could. One CEO tweeted, "Every executive should watch this exchange. It's leadership under pressure, perfectly executed." Politically, the impact was immediate. Democratic fundraising saw a noticeable bump as donors rallied behind Crockett's display of discipline and grace. Progressive organizations shared the clip as proof that politics didn't have to be defined by screaming matches. Meanwhile, conservative strategists scrambled. If Kellyanne Conway, their seasoned brawler, could be so thoroughly dismantled by quiet confidence, what did that say about their broader communication strategy? Polling revealed something deeper. Younger voters overwhelmingly sided with Crockett, describing her as presidential, authentic, and trustworthy. In contrast, Conway's performance was described as embarrassing, unhinged, and out of touch. The generational divide was unmistakable. Under 40 voters were drawn to composure and authenticity, while older voters were more split. But the influence went beyond politics. In churches, community groups, and even high school civics classes, Crockett's calm demeanor was celebrated as proof that disagreements didn't have to devolve into chaos. Teachers replayed the clip for students, showing them that democracy works better when people listen before they shout. The ripple effect was undeniable. Crockett had turned what was meant to be an ambush into a case study in effective communication. And in the process, she had raised her own profile from a freshman congresswoman to a national voice for a new generation of leadership. And as the dust settled, one question lingered. Was this just a viral flash, or had Jasmine Crockett quietly rewritten the rules of political debate in America? What unfolded in that studio wasn't just a debate. It was a clash between two completely different visions of leadership. One built on volume and confrontation, the other on composure and facts. Kellyanne Conway, the veteran who had spent her career out shouting critics, discovered that aggression has limits. For the first time, her trademark firepower couldn't dominate the stage. Across from her sat Jasmine Crockett, who never raised her voice, never lost her cool, and yet walked away with all the momentum. The viral response wasn't just about memes or late-night punchlines. It revealed something deeper, about where America might be headed. People are tired of shouting matches that generate more heat than light. They're hungry for leaders who can stand firm without being cruel, who can debate policy without questioning humanity, who can listen as well as they can speak. Crockett's performance didn't just make her a rising star. It set a new standard. It proved that calm can be more powerful than chaos, that steady truth can cut sharper than insults, and that sometimes the loudest voice in a room isn't the one people remember. In a political culture addicted to noise, this showdown asked a simple but unsettling question. Maybe strength isn't measured by how hard you yell, but by how long you can stay calm when the world is screaming at you. So what do you think? Did Jasmine Crockett deliver the masterclass America needed? Or was Conway right to unleash her fury? Drop your thoughts in the comments, and let's talk about what kind of leadership this country truly wants in the years ahead.